Today, I want to talk about why I eat 4 eggs every single day and why I genuinely think you should be eating more of them too. Now, you're probably wondering why I consider myself any kind of expert on eggs. And honestly, that's an excellent question. Sorry, I just had to do that. But the real answer is pretty simple. I've been eating eggs consistently for so many years that at this point I feel like I've earned the title. And along the way, I've picked up some really fascinating information that I think is worth sharing. So let's start with the first thing I want you to know, and this one might actually surprise you. You can't always tell how nutritious an egg is just by looking at the color of the yolk, at least not anymore, because here's what's actually happening behind the scenes. Farmers can now give chickens synthetic coloring agents that essentially let them choose exactly what shade the yolk turns out to be, and we're not talking about a small range here. There are actually 15 different shades between yellow and orange that a farmer can select from. 15. So unfortunately, that deep golden yolk you've been trusting as a sign of quality, it might just be a choice made on a color chart.
And it doesn't stop at eggs either. The same type of coloring is used in chicken meat itself, turning pale, almost white meat into that familiar yellow or beige tone that consumers expect. Apparently, people have very specific ideas about what their chicken should look like. But here's the thing, if those synthetic dyes aren't being used, the natural color of the yolk actually does tell you something real. It tells you how much carotenoid is present in that egg, and that matters for your health. Now, the color of the shell? That doesn't tell you much of anything nutritionally. Brown, white, speckled, it really doesn't matter. What does matter, what truly determines the nutrition of an egg and a chicken, is how that animal was raised and what it was fed.
And sadly, the way most chickens are raised today has led to something that's hard to ignore. Modern chicken has almost no flavor. We're talking about a piece of chicken breast so bland that companies actually have to add flavor to it. I'm not joking. Next time you pick up chicken breast at the grocery store, flip the package over and read the label. There's a very good chance you'll see natural flavoring or even artificial flavoring listed right there, because without it, that meat just doesn't taste like much. We've bred and raised chickens almost entirely for size and speed. Farmers need chickens that grow fast because they're sold by weight, and the result is a bird that's big, but not particularly flavorful or nutritious. To put the cost shift into perspective, in 2015, a whole chicken cost around $7. Now that actually sounds pretty cheap when you stop and think about everything that goes into raising one. But back in 1948, a chicken cost about $3. Adjusted for today's dollar, that's roughly equivalent to $30. And the reason that old chicken cost so much more in real terms, the quality was vastly better. Those chickens were raised differently, fed differently, and it showed in every bite. Before I get into the actual benefits of eating eggs, and there are a lot of them, I want to take a moment to break down some of the labeling terms you'll see at the store, because honestly, a lot of them are misleading. Let's start with free range. Sounds wonderful, right? Open fields, happy chickens roaming around. But what it actually means is that the chickens are not kept in a cage, and they technically have access to the outside. The problem is that the word access is never clearly defined. It could mean a small opening in the side of a barn that the chickens never even find. And on top of that, there's no required on-site inspection to verify any of this. So there's a lot of gray area hiding behind that label. Cage-free is a small step up. It simply means the chickens are outside of a cage, but it says nothing about whether they ever see the outdoors. Then there's grade A. This one might be the most misleading of all. Grade A has nothing to do with nutrition. It just means the shell is nicely shaped and free of cracks. That's it. I'm sure you've never come home excited to tell someone you picked up some grade A eggs because of their excellent roundness. Pasture-raised is another one that trips people up because it sounds a lot like pasture-raised, but they mean completely different things. Pasture-raised means the eggs have been gently heated to extend their shelf life. Pasture-raised means the chickens actually lived on a pasture outside, with room to roam, very different things. And vegetarian fed? This one sounds healthy, but all it really means is that the chickens were fed grains, typically soy and corn, which are almost always GMO. So while it sounds like a wholesome label, it's not exactly what most people picture. What I'd actually recommend is looking for organic, pasture-raised eggs. Better yet, if you have access to a local farmer's market, buy your eggs there. And if you have even a little bit of space, consider raising your own hens. That's what I've done, and the difference is remarkable. Our chickens produce so many eggs that we're still trying to figure out what to do with all of them. About 16 a day, even in the winter, when hens aren't normally supposed to be laying as heavily. And the quality compared to store-bought eggs is night and day. I've been running a lot of experiments lately, testing different soils, different feeds, different ways of raising animals, to see what actually produces the healthiest results. I'll be sharing all of that on a new YouTube channel soon. What I will say is that raising chickens on organic grains, without corn and soy, is not cheap, so we've been experimenting with more affordable alternatives. One of the most exciting things we've tried is something called fodder, which is basically sprouted barley. You start with a quantity of barley seed, let it sprout for about 7 days, and by the end of that process, it's increased in weight by 7 times. The chickens are absolutely obsessed with it. It's like a treat they never get tired of. So stay tuned, because I'll be sharing a lot more on that soon. All right, now let's get into what you're really here for, the actual benefits of eating eggs. And just a quick note before I do, I don't eat my eggs in the morning. I practice intermittent fasting, so my eggs are part of my lunch, usually somewhere around 2, 2:30, sometimes as late as 3 in the afternoon. The first major benefit is the quality of the protein, and when I say quality, I'm specifically talking about what's called the anabolic effect, meaning how effectively your body can actually use that protein to build and repair tissue like muscle, joints, and other proteins throughout the body. To give you a sense of how eggs compare, if we set aside breast milk, egg protein converts into body tissue at a rate of 48%. That's remarkably high. Meat and fish come in at around 32%. Soy protein is only about 17%. And whey protein, which many people spend a lot of money on, is only 16%. So what happens to the rest? It gets converted into glucose and burned as fuel. There's one more thing worth mentioning here, and it ties into something called the insulin index. This is a scale that measures how much a non-carbohydrate food raises insulin levels. And whole eggs, with the yolk and all the fat intact, have a significantly lower insulin response than egg whites alone. The more fat you remove and the more isolated the protein becomes, like in whey protein, the higher the insulin spike, which means whole eggs, eaten as nature intended, are basically the gold standard when it comes to protein. The next benefit is choline. Choline is essential for brain health, but it also plays a really important role in the liver. It actually acts like a bile salt and helps break down cholesterol. So if you're dealing with gallstones or a fatty liver, choline is something you want more of. Eggs also contain lecithin, which works alongside choline to help keep your cholesterol balanced. Now, I know a lot of people get nervous when they hear the word cholesterol and eggs in the same sentence. There was actually a study published that claimed eating eggs increased the risk of dying from a heart attack by something like 17%. I did a full video on that. I'll link it below. But the short version is that it was based entirely on a questionnaire. The association was incredibly weak, and it ignored a massive number of other variables that could just as easily explain those outcomes. I wouldn't even really call it a study. What eggs actually do is raise your HDL, the good cholesterol, more than your LDL, and that's a conversation worth having more deeply in a separate video. Eggs also contain a solid amount of vitamin K2, which is a nutrient that plays a key role in keeping calcium where it belongs, out of your arteries and out of your joints. And eggs have vitamin D, which is significant because there really aren't that many foods that naturally contain it. Vitamin D and K2 actually work together, so having both in one food is a real bonus. Eggs also contain vitamin E, which is great for your heart and your skin, and they're packed with vitamin A in one of the most bioavailable forms that exists, retinol. The deeper and richer the yolk color, by the way, the more vitamin A you're generally getting. Then there are the omega-3 fatty acids, especially plentiful in eggs from chickens that are allowed to go outside and eat worms and insects naturally. And eggs are loaded with B vitamins, B1, B2, B3, B6, and B12. On that note, the organic grain I feed my chickens is actually fermented for 3 days before I give it to them. That fermentation process unlocks a lot of the B vitamins and other nutrients that are otherwise locked up inside the grain. And as a bonus, fermented grain is easier for chickens to digest, which means you can actually feed them a little less and still get great results. Eggs also contain trace minerals, a range of important minerals overall, and, coming back to what we talked about earlier, carotenoids. Carotenoids are those nutrient-rich pigments that give the yolk its color, and they carry some impressive health benefits of their own. The two most notable ones are lutein, which is yellow, and zeaxanthin, which tends toward orange. Both of these pigments are especially important for your eyes. In fact, the highest concentration of carotenoids in your entire body is found in your eyes, specifically in the lens and the retina. They help protect against macular degeneration, and they help filter and reduce the impact of blue light from all the screens we're staring at every single day. Beyond eye health, there are also emerging benefits for brain health as well. Now, one thing people often ask is how you should actually cook your eggs to get the most nutrition out of them. Overheating can destroy some of those delicate carotenoids, so the way you prepare them does matter. Poached or over easy are both great options. If you prefer scrambled, here's a simple trick. Crack the eggs directly into the pan, let the whites just start to set, then turn the heat down and scramble everything together at that point. This is much better than beating the eggs in a bowl first and then pouring them into a hot pan. That extra step helps preserve a lot more of the nutrients. So now that you know all of this, if you're on the smaller side, 1 or 2 eggs a day is a great place to start. If you're larger or more active, 3 or 4 is a solid target. And if you still have concerns about cholesterol in eggs specifically, make sure you check out the video I'll link right here. It covers everything you need to know.